Alright, hello everybody. Friendly Red here, back for the second report of what new games are on my radar for 2026. February is a pretty packed month of releases, with plenty of wholly original titles, some remasters, early access departures, and some currently platform-locked games making their way to new audiences too. I'm interested in a fair amount of what February has on offer, so we'll go ahead and get right into it. But first, the usual disclaimer. Please keep in mind that release dates are always subject to change, and what's presented in this video may be out of date by the time it is posted. As I mentioned last month, I'll try to relay any delays or changes to release dates to games I discuss in the comments, so make sure to check there for any potential changes or updates. Now then, on with the video game discussing. Starting us off on the 3rd, we have Yap Yap. This is a silly new co-op multiplayer game that, on the surface, may seem pretty similar to games like Lethal Company and Repo, but differs in a few key areas. Whereas those games have you and your friends enter somewhat dangerous and spooky locales for the sake of collecting different items and treasures to sell for profit, Yap Yap instead has you entering different areas of a mage's tower for the sole purpose of causing destruction, breaking any items and trinkets you and your friends come across, rather than collecting them, which is where another notable different aspect of Yap Yap comes into play. In Yap Yap, you'll be able to cast different magical spells to help you in your vandalism and chaos. And to cast these spells, you'll actually have to use your voice in-game and speak the incantations aloud, which I think is a really cool and fun idea. It may not be the most original concept, as we did see another smaller game last year with a similar focus on casting spells with your voice in-game with Mage Arena, but with that game focusing on PvP, it doesn't quite interest me as much as Yap Yap. Using voice-activated spells to cause mayhem and break a bunch of stuff along with your friends, it just seems more enjoyable to me. Though, even without a PvP focus, I'm sure there will be plenty of potential accidental, or entirely intentional, damage and deaths while playing. The store page for the game also mentions that enunciation matters when using your voice to cast spells, and if it works well, that should make things even more interesting. Like, I'm just imagining trying to cast spells properly, but your incantations are being thrown off or interrupted due to your own laughter, screams, or some other flexings of your vocal cords due to whatever madness is being caused in-game by your friends or the various monsters that roam around the tower. Just like Lethal Company, Repo, Peak, or any of the other smaller cooperative multiplayer games that have been blowing up in popularity over the last few years, Yap Yap is looking to offer up some inexpensive and wacky fun for friend groups far and wide. I'll certainly be checking out with my friends and seeing just how ridiculous our magical shenanigans end up being. Yap Yap will be releasing on Tuesday, February 3rd, for PC. On February 11th, we've got Romeo is a Dead Man, the latest adventure from Suda51 and Grasshopper Manufacture. In case you are unaware, Suda51 and Grasshopper are the team behind some of the most bizarre, crazy, and ultra-violent action games that you can get your hands on, as they gave us such hits as the No More Heroes trilogy, Shadows of the Damned, Lollipop Chainsaw, and so many more. If you want some truly unique, weird, and amazingly fun action games, these are the guys to go to. Romeo is a Dead Man is looking to be yet another worthy addition to their lineup. I love the differing art styles that they have going on in this game with its trailers and cutscenes, and the action looks just as flashy and blood-soaked as I'd expect from Grasshopper, with a sweet mix of third-person melee combat and shooting, almost like a combination of gameplay styles from No More Heroes and Shadows of the Damned, which sounds pretty good to me. Also, I don't know if this is just me, but Romeo's design when he's transformed kind of reminds me of the hybrid devils from Chainsaw Man, but with more of a sci-fi or Super Sentai infused look to it. I don't know, I just think that's a cool combination, whether that's what they were going for or not. Honestly, I don't know if I have too much more to add here. I've thoroughly enjoyed my time with each and every one of Suda51 and Grasshopper's previous works, and I'm pretty sure Romeo is a Dead Man is going to be another winner for me. Perhaps even more than any other prior game from them, as the full-on sci-fi focus, mixed with the sweet differing art styles and combo of shooting and slashing, is all just checking so many boxes for me. I am a bit concerned about the game's technical performance, as some of the trailer footage has shown slowdown in some segments, so hopefully that gets cleaned up before launch. Other than that though, I'm completely sold on this one. It looks like yet another over-the-top, adrenaline-fueled action-adventure from the masterminds behind some of the best games in the genre. And if you've yet to play a Grasshopper production, well, I think they've got quite a nice new offering here for you, in addition to their legacy titles, all of which I'd highly recommend to any action game fans out there. Romeo is a Dead Man will be releasing on Wednesday, February 11th, for PS5, Xbox Series consoles, and PC. Right at the end of February, we have arguably the biggest release of the month, and one of my most anticipated games of the year as a whole, Resident Evil Requiem. The 9th mainline title in the series, Requiem arrives just in time for the 30-year anniversary of Resident Evil, and based on what we've seen of the game, it's looking like the ultimate combination of all the best parts of past RE games. In particular, Requiem seems to draw a lot from Resident Evil 2 and 4, as well as the more recent first-person entries in the series. Thanks to our dual protagonist setup in Requiem, we've got 2 styles of RE gameplay covered in this one game, with new protagonist Grace Ashcroft driving the slower, sneakier, and generally more tense and scary first-person sections of the game, like what we saw in 7 and Village, while returning protagonist and fan favorite Leon S. Kennedy drives a Porsche, as well as the more action-oriented, third-person shooter gameplay, similar to what we saw in his adventures in Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4. Also, quick side note, but can I just say what a cool last name Ashcroft is? Speaking of which, that also segues nicely into the story of Requiem, which seems to have a sort of ghost of the past or facing your fears kind of vibe to it, from what I've gathered. I mean, we seemingly have a remnant of the old Umbrella Corporation as one of our main antagonists, and we'll also be returning to Raccoon City in some form during the game, so I think that's a fair assessment. And as for my Ashcroft comment, Requiem brings an older spin-off RE game into the main series limelight, as Grace is the daughter of Alyssa Ashcroft, one of the playable protagonists from Resident Evil Outbreak, which was a co-op multiplayer game on the PS2 that featured a handful of different stories and scenarios centered around different survivors who were also present in Raccoon City during the outbreak that occurred in Resident Evil 2. It's really cool to see Capcom acknowledging an older title in the series like this, and I honestly wish they would have maybe remastered or at least ported Outbreak to modern platforms before Requiem. It would have been nice to get to know more about Alyssa before Requiem releases, and also just would have made for a fun revisit to Raccoon City before we, well, revisit Raccoon City. I'm really excited for Requiem. Capcom has been delivering hit after hit with their recent RE remakes and original games, and Requiem looks to continue that trend. The mixing of gameplay styles, the return of Leon alongside a new protagonist with roots in the series past, the gorgeous visuals that have been upgraded even further thanks to advancements in the RE engine, and a heavy collaboration with NVIDIA. Hell, even the game's main tagline, Requiem for the Dead, Nightmare for the Living, it just sounds so cool. I think everything is coming together with this one, and I cannot wait for it to release. Requiem is looking like a great way to celebrate the franchise's 30 years of history, and I think there's a good chance it'll end up being the ultimate Resident Evil game. Resident Evil Requiem will be releasing on Friday, February 27th for PS5, Xbox Series consoles, Nintendo Switch 2, and PC. With the yapping about Yap Yap, Romeo, and Requiem done and dusted, it's time we move on to the honorable mentions. And kicking things off on the 5th is Dragon Quest VII Reimagined. As that title would imply, this is a bit more than just a modern-day remaster or remake of Dragon Quest VII. While it does feature updated visuals and gameplay improvements, like many great remasters and remakes tend to, Reimagined also goes a bit further than that, looks to alter and streamline certain aspects of the story and other sections of the game to make it a bit more, we'll say, digestible than the original incarnations of Dragon Quest VII. I briefly talked about this back in my September 2025 Nintendo Direct video when the game was announced, but Dragon Quest VII isn't exactly my favorite entry in the series based on what I played of it, mainly due to it being quite lengthy, with the opening of the game and some other section of the story just kind of dragging on longer than I would have liked. However, with there being specific mention in the description for Reimagining, talking about how the story has been streamlined, it makes me hopeful that this version of Dragon Quest VII will be a bit more manageable to get through compared to the original or 3DS version. And with that in mind, alongside the other changes and improvements that are being made here, it does make me want to give 7 another shot, and hopefully I'll find it more enjoyable than I did when I originally played it. This one will be out for PS5, Xbox Series consoles, Nintendo Switch, Nintendo Switch 2, and PC. A little over a week later, Reanimal launches on the 13th. This is the latest creation from Tarsier Studios, the same team behind the first 2 Little Nightmares games. I've personally not played any of those games, albeit the original 2 from Tarsier, or the third one which was done by Supermassive Games, but I know they're very high quality releases loved by many. Reanimal is looking like another winner for Tarsier. I hope I'm saying that right. If there's one thing I know about Little Nightmares, it's that they are incredibly moody, atmospheric horror adventures, with environment and character designs that sort of remind me of Tim Burton's work, which is a great style to draw inspiration from, and definitely wins all of the brownie points from me. Thankfully, that signature style from the Little Nightmares games returns for Reanimal, but this time cranked up even further than ever, as Reanimal is going full-on M-rated compared to the T ratings of Little Nightmares 1 and 2, which means things are going to get even darker, creepier, and more disturbing than what was in those games, I would imagine. I'm definitely interested in trying this one out, and even though Tarsier didn't make Little Nightmares 3, they did decide to go the co-op route with Reanimal, much like how Supermassive did with 3, which honestly makes me more excited for this game than if it were just a single-player only joint. The darkness and horror may be amplified this time, but at least you can brave it with a friend. And, well, you know me. I'm a sucker for co-op games. This one will be out for PS5, Xbox Series consoles, Nintendo Switch 2, and PC. Just about a week after Reanimal creeps onto the scene, Demon Tides launches on the 19th. This is a souped-up follow-up to 2021's Demon Turf. It's a pretty unique-looking and very fun little 3D platformer, and one that I actually live-streamed back when I was doing that whole Twitch television thing. For whatever reason, though, I never got very far in the game, and all these years later, I've still yet to finish it, which is something I really should rectify at some point. Reminiscing aside, Demon Tides looks to retain a lot of what made Demon Turf great, with plenty of attitude, speed, and great movement and abilities to utilize as you platform your way across the game, which looks much more open and vast than Demon Turf was. Kinda reminding me of something like Mario Odyssey or Bowser's Fury. I've been in the mood to play some 3D platformers since Yuka Replayly released, and while I haven't gotten to that one yet, I may use Demon Tide's upcoming release as an excuse to finally get back to and complete Demon Turf. Also, I will say, while Demon Tide certainly does look nice, and I think the jump to full 3D environments and characters makes sense for a sequel, it doesn't feel quite as unique and quirky, I guess, as that original game did, with its mix of 2D character sprites and somewhat less detailed and simplified 3D environments. I think it's mainly just a personal preference thing, but Tides does look great visually, and I think the developers did a great job translating the character designs, charm, and quirkiness of the 2D artwork and designs from the first game into full 3D here. If I do end up going back to Demon Turf, finishing it up before Tides releases, then I may just end up picking it up upon release, but I suppose only time will tell. Regardless if I get to this one at release, or perhaps a bit later, it is looking really good. I'm happy to see a sequel to Demon Turf got made. This one will be out for PC. Finishing off our honorable mentions for February of 2026, we've got 2 definitive editions, remasters, whatever you want to call them, of 2 excellent action RPGs, those being Ys 10, Proud Nordics on the 20th, and Tales of Berseria Remastered on the 27th. And I do quite like Ys 10, as it was one of my picks for favorite games of 2024, but I gotta be honest, this new version of the game isn't really the most exciting, for a few reasons. First and foremost, the timing of this version, or at least when it was announced, was pretty abysmal. At least here in North America, as this definitive version of Ys 10 was announced only 2 months after the original game debuted here, with no details or info regarding if existing customers would be able to upgrade to this version for a discounted price, or if we would just have to buy the game outright again. And, well, as you can probably guess by me bringing up this point, it is seemingly unfortunately the latter. If you want to play the new content added in this Proud Nordics version of Ys 10, then you'll have to pay up. Again. As for that new content in this version, to be honest, it really doesn't seem like anything game-changing. There's a new island to explore as part of some new story content, quality of life and graphical improvements, apparently, and what sounds like a late/in-game dungeon of sorts, full of challenging encounters to overcome. All cool additions, sure, but additions that weren't spending $70 for a physical copy of this version of the game, and presumably another $60 or maybe even $70 for the PC version? Yeah, I don't think so. So yeah, with all that laid out, hopefully it's clear why this one is getting thrown on the honorable mentions list. Again, I really did and do like Ys 10, but the way this whole thing has been handled just feels kinda scummy, and if there really is no discount or upgrade path offered to those of us who already bought the original version of Ys 10, then yeah, I won't be getting to this one until it is much, much cheaper. This one will be out for PS5, Nintendo Switch 2, and PC. Similar to Ys 10, Proud Nordics, Tales of Berseria Remastered isn't the most flashy or exciting of remasters. I mean, it doesn't really even add any new content or gameplay mechanics like Proud Nordics does to Ys 10. Instead, Berseria Remastered falls in line more with what you'd expect from a pretty typical remaster, sprucing up some things here and there, adding some quality of life improvements, and making the game accessible on more modern platforms. Nothing fancy, really. I will say, this one is a bit more enticing to me than Proud Nordics, as I've never played the original game, though I do remember this one being recommended to me by a friend many years ago, so perhaps this remaster releasing serves as the perfect excuse to finally give the game a go. And hey, the asking price of $40 for Berseria is much more reasonable than what Proud Nordics is charging, but much like with that version of Ys 10, there doesn't seem to be any sort of discount or upgrade path to the remaster for current owners of the original Tales of Berseria, which is, once again, pretty lame. Dumb business practices aside, Berseria does look like a really fun action RPG, and I'll probably check this one out, as it does look like something I would really enjoy. And who knows, it may serve as a catalyst for me to finally get more into this series. As a fan of the action RPG genre, I probably owe it to myself to experience more of the Tales games, as there are some absolute gems that have been released over the course of its 30-year history. This remaster will be out for PS5, Xbox Series consoles, Nintendo Switch, and PC. There's even more cool releases happening this month, with big sequels like Nioh 3, My Hero Academia, All's Justice, and Yakuza Kiwami 3 launching, and some somewhat older games that are only on one or a few platforms making their way to new audiences, with Rune Factory, Guardians of Azuma, No Sleep for Kaname Date, Avowed, and BlazBlue Entropy Effect all getting new versions on new hardware. Most of these are games I've already played, or in a series I'd need or want to play the previous games in before getting to these new releases, hence why I don't really have too much else to add outside of mentioning their upcoming launches. Either way, it's an exciting lineup of releases, and when you take all of these games and add them together with the other titles discussed already, it makes for a pretty great and varied offering of game releases, and what I'd say is the first truly stacked month of 2026. I'm certainly eager to get to my priority pickups once they release, and to eventually get to most, if not all of the games in my honorable mentions, in the near future. But, with all that being said, I think that'll do it for this video. If you made it to the end, thank you for watching. Your continued viewership and support is greatly appreciated. I hope I was able to entertain, inform, and perhaps interest you in some upcoming games that you may not have known about. And last, but certainly not least, as always, I'll see you next time.